We're here today with a special guest with the Arizona drag racing legends, Mr. Jim Rodgers. Jim plays a key point to the history of drag racing in Arizona, as it was him and his family that basically built Beeline Dragway and gave us our first major drag strip in Arizona that became the synonymous with drag racing in Arizona in the United States, and not only in the Arizona area. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you here. You're also in the Arizona Drag Racers Hall of Fame. Congratulations on that. Tell us about yourself. Where, are you from here originally, or were you?
Yeah. My family's been here since before the turn of the 19th century. My great-granddad, William Bruce, used to work for Charles Goodnight and push cattle up the Goodnight Loving Trail in West Texas all the way to Wyoming. And he came out here before the turn of the century. Of course, we've got a couple centuries going now. So I was actually born here. I was actually conceived here. Let's put it that way, because my parents were here, my mom and my dad, and I was born in 1943. But so happens I was conceived, and we think life begins at conception. My dad had to go down to Texas for a quick job, and I popped into the world down there, but I was conceived here, so I've got dual citizenship. I'm both Texan and Arizona.
So from the Republic of Texas and then in Arizona. So that's pretty awesome. It all fits within the lifestyle of your family, and I love the fact that the history that you're long-term Arizona. It's not many people who, even first generation, that are natives. You multi-generational before you, which is awesome. When did you first get in? Let's put it this way: how did your family get interested in the opportunity of building a drag strip?
Well, when I was in school, I was in high school. I went to Scottsdale High School, and back in the mid '50s, when Chevrolet came out with the small block Chevys and the 265s and then the 283s, and then the Chrysler got into it with the Dodges and the Pontiacs with the 389s, and that's when I grew up. And I actually was going to high school, and my dad is a real estate developer. He developed more of Camelback Mountain and Arcadia district. He had numerous subdivisions, and so I was interested in getting a car, but I had to work 2 to 4 hours every 3 days to 4 days a week after school. The time I was a junior in high school, I had enough money saved to buy a new car. So I bought a 1960 Chevrolet 348, 3 2-barrel carburetors, Duntov cam and solid lifters, 4-speed on the floor. So I was a junior. Before that, I was all tied up in horses, and simply because my mother's side of the family came from the ranching side of the world. My dad's side of the family was in the real estate business, building houses, doing subdivisions and stuff like that. I had to do that, so by the time I was through high school, I wanted to get back into the ranching business. So I used to rodeo and rope and all that stuff.
If anything to do with horsepower, you loved it.
Yeah, and using horsepower. But when I got to be a junior in high school, I bought this car, and I found out that pretty girls like fancy cars more than they did horses back in those days. It may change by today, I don't know. But anyway, I bought this car, so I got interested in cars and drag racing, and I started racing first out at Mel Larson's Raceway, and I became very good friends with Frank. And I'm getting back up a minute. I hope you can edit this a little bit.
That's okay. With Frank Sanders?
Yeah, with Frank Sanders, and then Del Blades, and so Frank had a header shop over there on, I think, McDowell and 34th Street, or Thomas, I guess, one of the two, but it's been half a century ago, and all that time goes. Anyway, I got involved, and I was sponsored by that, and it got to the point where I was traveling around the country and winning a lot of drag races in Class A and B and that type, depending on the year. And so I got got to be driving, and Frank Sanders asked me if I'd drive for his car, and so did Del Blades, and both of them are in the Drag Racing Hall of Fame. And so I did, and luckily I had the skills and whatever. I won the AHRA Winter Nationals when I was driving for Del Blades.
So where was the Winter Nationals then?
And then I won the Winter National, NHRA Winter Nationals in Pomona, California, driving for Frank Sanders. We won Super Stock Automatic, and the cars the very tough cars back then were like the Ram Chargers and all those. They were in the Super Stock. It was just the era right before the funny cars. The next year they came out with the funny cars, and I bought my own there. I had Dana Brothers Dodge, and then of course when I was driving for Frank Sanders and we won the Winter Nationals Pomona, we were driving for Town and Country Plymouth. And so luckily I got to win 2 cars, but meanwhile traveling around.
Let me ask you a question. You said you won the AHRA Winter Nationals as well. I grew up here in the Valley. I remember prior to Beeline Dragway, I have no idea where the Winter Nationals would have been before Beeline.
Well, no, I won the NHRA.
Just NHRA, okay.
And that was Pomona, California, at the Pomona Fairgrounds. I may have made a mistake.
Okay.
But I wanted to do this, and Jim Tice, president of the American Hot Rod Association, he came out here, and out at Mel Larson's build a little racetrack out on Grand Avenue, about almost to Wickenburg, and I got to know him, and I was down there, and I won the World Championships, the AHRA World Championships, and it's out there down Dallas-Fort Worth area. Green Valley Raceway, I believe, was the name of the racetrack. And I told him I was thinking about building a drag strip. I told him if I build a nice enough drag strip, would you keep? He was going to move the Winter National someplace else, and I said, if I build you a first-class racetrack, will you bring it here? So my dad and Bob Maytag were building the Phoenix Zoo, and I was living over there while I was going to ASU. They had a little farmhouse. It's a one-room house with a kitchen and a bedroom. And so I lived there, and I wrote a business plan to build a drag strip. And I asked my dad if I could present this plan to some of his investors. He did have investors on different projects, and they said yes. And I had 4 other investors, and I used them, and they were all excited about it. So this was in 1962. My dad and Bob Maytag just finished the Phoenix Zoo. And so my dad was free to do anything, so I went and talked to him, and these investors, and they were all also close friends, and we did it. So we built the Beeline Dragway, and we had opening on October 3rd of 1963. Meanwhile, I had made a deal with Jim Tice. If we did this, he would give us the Winter Nationals, 64 Winter Nationals, the Beeline Dragway out at the drag strip. And we know it's out there in the Pima, Maricopa Indian community, and we leased the land out there, and we opened up on that October, and then October 63, October 3rd was our first race, and we had the 1964 Winter Nationals there at Beeline. The
interesting thing was your involvement with the tribe, and for that location. It was a great location for the track. At the time, it's a little bit, the city hadn't grown that far out, so now it's like if it were there still, it would be a problem with noise issues, and people would be complaining that lived in Mesa or probably or the Lehigh area. But it was a beautiful facility. How did you pick that location, or was that what they had?
Well, I picked it. My dad helped me. My dad was more or less my operating partner. And we went out there, and we had to have water, we had to have electricity and stuff like that. He made a deal with the APS, I believe it was, to tap into that big power line about a mile south of us, and we got meters to run the drag strip on it. And so we tied up the lease with the Indians, and the Pimas, they have since grown into a multi-billion-dollar deal if you drive down the 101 right now. You look at all those fancy office buildings and stuff like that. It was good. So I was happy to get them started in leasing some of their land.
So you did all this at 21 years old?
I was actually 20 years old, right, when I was general manager of Beeline Dragway. Now, carrying on to Beeline a little bit further, we had to build it opened up in October of '63, and we sold it the spring of '67, and I was going to retire and not be in the drag racing business, and Jim Tice phoned me and said, will you be interested in building a drag strip in Kansas City? So I moved to Kansas City, and we built the Kansas City International Raceway, which also had a sports car track with it. And I spent my time there. In addition to that, I became vice president of the American Hot Rod Association and national race director. And I traveled all over the United States doing that, promoting drag racing. And meanwhile, we had sold the Beeline Dragway in '67, but we had to repossess it because the people that bought it weren't making a deal. So I had my dad's partners and stuff and wanted to make sure they got a deal, so we got it, and I took it back, and then I put together a partnership, myself and Jim Tice and two other people. I can't remember their names offhand, but we bought the Beeline Dragway. And so now I had the Beeline Dragway here, and I had the Kansas City International Raceway in Kansas City, and the fellow that worked for me in Kansas City, I got him out here, and he became general manager out here, and I'd come out in the winters and spend a couple, 3 months out here, and the rest of the year in Kansas City. And so, as well as doing all of the major championships around the country for AQHA. And for a couple, 3 years of doing that, meantime I'd bought a ranch west of Kansas City, about 60 miles, and I was traveling back and forth to Kansas City. So I sold my interest, I think, in 1973 in Beeline in Kansas City, and that's when I basically retired from the drag racing industry.
KCIR, which I have a lot of friends from that area, that a lot of great memories. Just like we hear Beeline, but Kansas City, certainly you had a great track there as well. A lot of loyal racers, and wonderful facility you built there. When did you, before we move on to your post racing endeavors, because I really want to hear about that, because it still has to do with horses and horsepower. It's all great, but so you raced up. Did you quit racing once you opened the drag strip up?
Yes, pretty much so. The first couple years I did something like driving for Frank Sanders or Del Blades, and they needed me to drive because I was young, and they were first-class drivers too, but apparently I had a little better reflexes or whatever it was, and I won a lot of races. I used to travel, before I got involved with the drag strip, I traveled all over California, and go down to Texas and go to the HRA and the NHRA, played both of them because I didn't care what association it was. And then of course I got involved with the American Hot Rod Association, so I became a big advocate for them.
So the great thing about the HRA is, I've raced both, and NHRA certainly has a level of professionalism that they were they're big at the time, but the great thing about the HRA was it was really great for the sportsman racers.
Yeah.
That you were able to, I remember being at the Winter Nationals, and somebody literally could drive in and maybe race once or twice and not know what class he's going to be in. And the HRA had a class that could accommodate the sportsman guy. And that's kind of sad that the emphasis on sportsman racing is not what it once was.
Well, one of the interesting things about the drag racing industry, and of course being in it and being on the outside and watching it, what I think is the reason drag racing isn't as big a deal as it used to be, because the factories were involved. General Motors, Chrysler, Ford were all interested in cars, and general public people could compete in a car. You could go down to Courtesy Chevrolet and buy you a Chevrolet, go to Dana Brothers Dodge or Town & Country Plymouth, buy you a Hemi or whatever it was, and people would compete. Now drag racing is really a professional sport. It seems like there's no real classification for stock cars. We had 23 classes of classification, and there was a place where if you had a Chevrolet or a 289 Pontiac or whatever it was, or whatever year it was, you go back to 1955 when they first came out with the small block Chevrolets. There were classes for those, all the way up to the big Hemis and the dual 4 barrels and all that stuff later on. It became a very active sport where everybody could compete. And I announced all of the national championships, and I was race director for all the nationals. But I could remember in those days, we get the crowd standing up and cheering here. How about you Ford lovers? Or are you Chevy lovers? Are you Mopar people? Or on and on and on. And okay, well, what do you Chevrolet people think about it? There'd be 2 stock cars out there, and they might be super stocks or whatever it was. But everybody had a personal interest in drag racing, and it made it an international sport as far as what people loved, and people loved it. I could drive to Chicago and race at Chicago Raceway and have just as good a racetrack and other places, but you know, it was a family sport almost.
With Beeline, certainly in the HRA, we cultivated a lot of HRA national champions from Arizona over the years, and it gave them, you know, the great place to race here because of the rules and the structure. They were able to go race relatively dozens of tracks that, you know, within a day or two drive from here, because being out west, we do have real estate between us and the next state, unlike back east. But I do remember there were a lot of champions that came out of that were regular Beeline racers, and that, you know, and that's all because of your efforts with the HRA and what that really meant. Do you remember any, like, you know, what was you open a track up, you get it going, there's always something like, wow, what you know, what's going on here? Or, you know, is there, like, what was your biggest surprise that you weren't prepared for? Do you remember any stories about the track that you want to share with us? Kind of like fun stories, or like,
no, it just seems like things went right, and the things we did. Now, when I used to do most of my racing, we'd drive to California, race Pomona, we'd go to Lyons Drag Strip, or even they opened a new one, and they moved the Winter Nationals over to Irwindale for 1 year, but it wasn't nearly as successful as it was here at Beeline Dragway, and consequently they brought it back. And it's interesting that we created a lot of classes for those stock cars, as well as all the gassers and dragsters and hot rods and everything else. And there was a place for everybody, even motorcycles, to compete out of Beeline Dragway. And it made the sport grow in a major way. And of course, I was sponsored by major companies like Chevrolet and Chrysler when I was doing it.
Certainly the success of HRA and Beeline Dragway, I mean, definitely the class racing before we even got, you know, later years got into bracket racing, but it always seemed like you could go even to a local Saturday night event out at Beeline, and you would have a class to race in and be competitive and have a chance of winning a trophy, within your classification, which is something you should be really proud of. It was a major deal. It became synonymous, the Winter Nationals, with people coming there. Before we had a golf tournament, but we didn't have Super Bowls. We didn't have a lot of other things that attract people here in the wintertime. But Beeline Dragway and the Winter Nationals brought a lot of people to Phoenix area in the wintertime because the weather back home was terrible. The racers wanted to get out here. A lot of them that went on to race in Pomona afterwards, they used it as a warm-up race or part of their circuit to race both tracks. You had a lot of professional racers that would definitely hit first Beeline, then go to Pomona. It was a big part of the swing. Before we had what some would maybe argue too many national events that there are now, that they kind of get lost. So something for you to be proud of, and it's an amazing story that you did it at 20 years old. You started this, and something really be proud of, because it's a lot of great memories for a lot of people. You talked about in 1971 you stepped away from it and you went in. You decided that I'm going to go do something else with my thrill is going to be somewhere else now. What did you get into after that?
I was we liked ranching, but I was one of the founders and the professional retriever trainers. I trained field trial retrievers, and talking about Labradors and Golden Retrievers and Chesapeake Bay Retrievers, but competing in a field trial is a major deal, and I loved it. I'm an avid hunter and fisherman and outdoorsman all my life. I wasn't into team sports like a lot of kids were in high school and college. I liked individual deals, and competing and hunting and fishing was all a good deal.
I have family members that were big into the hunting dogs as well as I know how exciting that is, and they would raise some I can't remember the breed, but it was a Weimaraner or something like that, and they would specific, and it was very exciting to be around that and see how that was. It's very satisfying. You've always had a rush for doing something, so obviously it didn't stop there. You eventually
I went through a divorce, and we had bought that ranch in Kansas, and my wife, we're still good friends, but I thought, well, I'm going to give her everything. I'm taking a brand new truck and a dog truck and my dogs and my guns, and I came back home to Arizona.
Kind of like a true cowboy story.
Yeah, and so I gave her everything. I kept my earning ability, and I've been in the association and outstanding business of dealing with people, and you've got to be able to deal with people. And when you're dealing with people, I don't care whether it's drag racing, dogs, or horses or whatever, or being president of the United States, you're dealing in a lot of politics, and you got to keep people happy, and the more happy people you have, the more successful you have, and you want people to enjoy what they're doing when they're spending their time.
I know that you've a lot of great success. The last thing I'm aware of, and I'm not fully understanding of what it was, but you did some of the horse, the barrel racing or horse.
Well,
it was something to do with. You tell me what it was. I know it had something with guns and shooting and horses and.
Well, currently the last thing I did was the Cowboy Mounted Shooting Association, where it's like barrel racing, only it's not barrel racing. You have one course of fire, and you go around the barrel and go around the barrel and go around the barrel and run to the firing line, and the horses are just they're like machines, But in mounted shooting, we've got 89 different courses of fire, and we're taking 2 single action revolvers and having to change guns, follow a course where the horses don't know where they're going, so you got to run full speed as fast as you can go. And the horses, it's like the American Quarter Horse Association says, it's been revolutionizing the whole horse industry, because we also made it gender split, because women and men are different. I mean, how many women play for the NFL or some of these deals? They're just as talented, and they're very good on horses, but they're different. And so we had deals, and we had world champion cowgirl, world champion cowboy, and then the overall champion, as well as 23 different classes, just like the drag racing industry. And before that, I was involved in the Single Action Shooting Society, which is a much bigger deal. See, we only have about 19,000 members in CMSA, but the Single Action Shooting Society, which is using guns of the Old West and like combat shooting, where you do that. Last time I was one of the founders of that, and we had 145,000 members, because people didn't have to have horses. And it's just like cars. More people own cars than horses, and so on. So, but the whole thing is, I spent my whole life in the association business, in trying to be in a business that makes people able to compete, and then but have fun doing it too. And there's so many of these sports that you play football, you may enjoy it, but you may get your brains knocked out.
Right.
Yeah.
So you all along you've enjoyed the promoting of events that get basically adrenaline type of things.
Yeah, I guess I'm more of an entrepreneur than a businessman, and I was always like to bring in good business partners to do certain aspects of the business, like the accounting or different thing. I did the advertising. I don't know if you can remember back in those days our commercials. and is Saturday night at Beeline Dragway. And we use a 50,000 watt station there in Oklahoma City. You could listen to a Beeline Dragway commercial in Chicago or
KOMA.
Yeah, KOMA.
Yeah.
All those things. And then it worked out very fine, and it's just been a type of lifestyle I like, and I like that individual competition. You know, you may be maybe 25 people in your class, but guess what? You've got to beat you got to beat your share of them as an individual. You can't have a team to do it. You got to be an individual.
The world of drag racing is definitely changing, and some, you know, we see more key tracks closing than opening. What do we do? I mean, do you ever put any thought to? I'm not asking you to open another drag strip up, but you know, it's a challenge. In what do we need to do to bring? Definitely, there's still an interest and passion for cars.
Yeah,
have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I've thought about it, and I'm not quite sure, but I think one of the biggest problems is you can't go to a dealer and buy a car that you can be competitive with. Back when I was doing this, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and up to the 80s, the manufacturers were very busy trying to build hot rods inside. I mean, look at a Hemi engine in a car, or 2 4-barrel carburetors, or 3 2-barrels. They were building vehicles, but now the factories are more interested in gas mileage. They want to get 25, 30, 40 miles a gallon, and that's what draws it. They don't make really good, exciting, fun race cars.
So you think that's a big part of it?
Yeah.
You know, you talk about getting people involved in different classes from the bottom and bring them in from the bottom, and some go further and become professional. And one thing that I do remember great about Beeline Dragway was Saturday night, Big Daddy Done Garlits. Okay, you would bring people in on a regular basis, monthly events, or every 6 weeks you'd have some type of major event that would bring people out to sit in the stands.
Yeah.
And the thing I see now is that there's so many national events, those people don't do match racing anymore. And as such, the local people don't get a chance to get interested in. So you would have these nice events that were affordable for people to get in with their families. Then when you had the Winter Nationals, you'd have way more of those cars there, and there's a bigger rush, and you would get the crowd out there because they were out there on the Saturday nights, they were loyal to you, and they want to come out for the big event. I think that's kind of what's I see as missing, is the incubator process, how to bring the sportsman people, the new people into it, and also the excitement of to generate the fans, because you had a lot of people who were fans that never raced, but they love the adrenaline rush of watching the cars get on the track, and you provided for them. But when the touring pros went away on the match racing thing, you know, to me that's kind of, you know, we need your ideas. We need a you in this present time now, somebody that had your desire and passion.
Well, one of the things about it is you got to properly advertise things, and you know, if you can make where everybody can get involved from a level 1 up to a level 10, let's say, the AA fuel dragsters would be a level 10 or level 1000, whatever you want to call it. We're getting people involved, and guess what? People who come out to the racetrack, there's a 60 Chevrolet like mine. It may have a bigger engine and stuff, but I'm going to root for that car. Hey, your friend, you're with you, that's a car like mine. And you know, one of the interesting things about happened at Beeline Dragway, we were the largest radio advertiser in the state of Arizona, and maybe a lot further. But I got a call, I think it was either the president of the Arizona State University, or else it was the governor. I think it was the governor, but I can't remember. Said, "You people are really hurting our attendance at the football games on Saturday night and Sundays. We're having all these drag races, and you advertise Saturday night or Sunday." And he said, "Why don't you just not have as many races?" And I said, "We can't do that. Our people love it just like that. They love what they're doing. They might like watching a football game, but they don't play football." and maybe I had a cousin that did it 30 years ago, but you've got people out there that can go to the dealer and buy your car, and everybody has a pretty close interest in it, and you can get involved in the sport down here with a 6-cylinder or something and be a Class F or whatever it is, automatic, and you can move up to faster cars right through the stock cars. Then you can get involved in the handmade cars, the professional type cars, where you got to build cars like, look at Johnny Loper, how popular he was, and on and on and on. And of course Connie Coletta and Don Prudhomme and those guys that I was friends with, I got them to come to Arizona. And one of the reasons we built Beeline Dragway out here, it was a little further east. It was about 6-7 hours closer than California, where they had the Pomona Winter Nationals. We'd over here, you could drive here from Denver, or drive here from California, or a lot of it. And guess what? Had the Winter Nationals in a wonderful place where you could drag race in the wintertime. You go to Chicago, you don't drag race in January and February and March, and you're lucky to get started in April. Just like in Kansas City, when I'd come out here, we'd reopen Kansas City, but we wouldn't do it till about the middle of April.
What was amazing about Beeline was, to compare to present day in Arizona here, was that we would race year round, and even when we had hot days, because it was out there, out of the city somewhat, it would still be warm out there, but we would still race. Now it gets to be above 105 degrees, and we're going to stop racing till the fall. Yeah. I do miss that about. We didn't think twice. We're out there. We're going to go. Let's go racing. The track's open. Let's get out there.
It could be 112, and we were going to have the drag race because we're going to do it. And guess what? People will do things that they love doing, regardless of what the weather is. But if you're out there having to go take a job and it's just a way to earn a buck or two, you probably do it. And what I think in my whole life, the thing that I enjoyed doing is getting people where they enjoyed the sport. Even in cowboy mounted shooting today, the big thing is money. But guess what? There's more people out here in the other lower classes that would like to be up there, or maybe they're just as happy there. And we've got it to a point where it's just as important and just as hard to win the entry-level class as it is the number 6 class. See, we go class 1 through 6 in cowboy mounted shooting, and then that's 1 through 6, men's and women's, so there's 12 classes, and we have senior men's and women's, and so you're getting that up there. Then we have junior classes, and guess what? People are having just as much fun, and guess what? In the class, it's just as hard to win class 1 as it is class 6, and that's the same way in drag racing. You have a AA fuel dragster, it's tough to win it, but guess what? If you've got 20 Class C stock cars, you got to be good to beat those other 19 if you want to do it. And that's what made it popular. Everybody had true competition within their levels, and we had levels where people could compete, and I think that's the hardest thing today. You look at these drag races today, these people have thousands and thousands of dollars in custom made cars.
Right.
I wish we could figure out how to get more stock cars, even if we go back and bring the old stock cars here but make them run pretty much stock.
Well, we definitely, there's still a big passion for drag racing, and as somebody who's been in the performance industry, that's what I've done for my whole life. Our concern is always, are the young people coming in, and they are coming in. They just have to find the right vehicle. There's different interests. It's definitely splintered somewhat with the street outlaws and the different type of racing that goes on. But the drag racing will be around, and because of people like you, entrepreneurs that put together a game plan, made a dream happen and become a reality. They brought more people into the sport. Without it, I used to have a speed shop here in Phoenix, and whenever something would, people, we love the races because people would break parts and it would sell more parts.
Yeah.
When the other track, later on when people put a concrete starting line in the track, the racers would go, we're going to break our rear end, break the rear end, and the speed shop owners are going, oh yeah, baby, we're going to sell a lot more parts, you know. So the whole part, it was a big part of the economy in the whole automotive aftermarket. You had to have a place to race, and we really appreciate your efforts and your history in Arizona. Arizona is a major player in drag racing, and in Beeline Dragway was a major stepping stone along the way to get us where we are today. And you know, look at you. You know, you got a great smile. You got the gentleman cowboy that you are, but you are a true businessman, entrepreneur, and you did a lot of great things for our racing scene in Arizona. Anything you want to say?
No,
I'd like to close up. I think you've done a great job.
Yeah, we still go to drag races. I love drag racing. I'm not in the business anymore, and I'm not going to be racing anymore. But I just love it, and I hope that the factories are getting back into just a little bit of horsepower deal, and they need to be selling their cars with horsepower more than gas mileage if they want to make the racing business better.
Well, we hope they're listening.
And even if they could come with a classification system, so if these Volkswagens or whatever these really high mileage cars could even compete against it, they would love it too.
We need to get the entry level people back into drag racing. That's for sure.
Exactly right.
Jim, it's been a great honor to have you here today. You're definitely an Arizona drag racing legend for all you've done for the sport in Arizona and nationally with the involvement with the American Hot Rod Association. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for your passion and your love of the sport. Congratulations on being in the Arizona Drag Racing Hall of Fame as well. And thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here and all the people in here, and I just love it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.